Hello, hello, hello! Welcome to a video about a very often overlooked sort of page in Omnisphere. Which page is that going to be? The initial one, the one that we're looking at right now when you first load up Omnisphere. There's a lot of good stuff on here that is often overlooked. Let's face it, most of us, when we first load Omnisphere, either dive straight into picking a patch, playing it. If you're programming, dive straight into layer A, or the effects, or the arpeggiator. Don't spend much time on this page, but you're missing out. And this is why. I'm going to give you a quick whistle stop tour of each bit, and there's one particular area I'm really going to do a big deep dive in, so buckle up and off we go. Most of us know voices speak for itself. 16 it's set at, so that means it'll play 16 notes before we start losing notes from the bottom up, basically, of what you're playing. And the reason why you might want to set it high, because you're thinking, but I haven't got 16 fingers to play, or 16 fingers and thumbs to play. Well, that's because if you sustain a patch, or the patch has a very long decay on it, you'll end up using voices. So if I got something, it's a bass and guitar sound, it won't sustain for very long. But if you've got a synthesizer that you've gone and done some program that does a long release, if I play 8 notes and then succeed by another 8 or 9 notes, it's amazing how many voices that does actually take up. So that's the reason why you might want more voices than actually says there. It says there, more voices than what your fingers can actually play on in one go. Octave speaks for itself. I can go either an octave up the keyboard, 2 octaves up. So basically, if I play middle C, play middle C again, sound an octave higher. Play middle C again, you play 2 octaves higher. So that's a global effect. So you can go on each layer and pick if that's what octave it plays in. But if you want the whole of the sound to be an octave higher, that's your quick way of doing it. You can also change your tonal scales. So we're on equal tempo Western. That's the modern scale that we use in Western world. But you can also use some of these. For example, you've got alpha RB 19 tone. That means that if I play a note, that note will repeat an octave higher after the 19th note of the keyboard I've played. So the hint is what it says at the end. So that's 22 notes, 7 notes, 24 notes. We've got clock speed. Now this is an interesting one. How many times have you had an arp playing and you're thinking, that's too fast, I need to go into ARP, and you start messing around with this 16th, 8th quarter? No need to. Go into main where it says clock speed, half. There you go. And that for a quarter. So if you want the whole patch to sort of sync to half the speed it was playing at the normal, that's the way to do it. Now it also affects any other rhythmic things you've got going on. For example, if you've got mod envelope 4 playing a rhythmic pattern as well, it will halve that speed. That can be quite handy, and I'll go into that in another video, because I'm looking back at what I've done in the past and I thought I've not really touched on what mod envelope 4 can do and why is it special to other mod envelopes. So we'll get to that in a later video. Signal path normal. This normal means that each of these layers operate independently. So that means I can change anything on here and it won't affect anything on here. And each one can have its own effects playing. However, if I want to save a few CPU cycles because I want all layers to use exactly the same reverb, but I don't want it on the common page for whatever sound design reason, dead easy. Just go into signal path, shared, and this light will go orange or dusky yellow, whichever one I call it. If I put another layer on, it does the same, which means if I go into my effects section, everything, layer A, B, C, D, is lit, and they're all using the same effects. Oop, turn my harp off, apologies. So they're all using the same layer of effects. Just turn B off. And it shares a signal path, which means that whatever I do to the ring modulation, wave shaping, etc., will affect all layers as well. They're not independent anymore. That can come in handy if you want to save on a few CPU cycles, or you want every layer to have exactly the same sort of texture, if you will, except for you can have a different sound source. Quite handy. Latch and trigger here, you've got different types of trigger. These are great for live mode. I will go into that again in the updated video. I have done bits about live mode before, if you look back at my catalogue, but this, I'm going to do another video that sort of goes absolutely gazillion miles further than what I've done in those videos. Gain, very simple, very quick and dirty way of making a patch louder or quieter. So if this patch was too loud, it's not, but if it was, I can just turn it down straight away. And that's a global thing as well. So if I turn it down here, all layers are turned down. Same with this. This is great for live mode as well, because what it means by part is these are parts. So we'll turn the part down, because if I turn that down to there, if I go back to multi, it's turned it down on there. So I'll just turn that up back to 0. There's an easier way. On a Mac, press Command and click. I think it's Control on a PC. You can mute the whole layer and you can solo the whole layer. Now, these two are interesting. Personally, I've not really played with these too much, but I might be doing in the future. You can't modulate these before I start, so if I right click on them, there's no way of actually modulating these. But these are a global master filter, so this alters the whole cutoff for the sound and the resonance as well. So that can come in handy when you want to apply a general cutoff or resonance to shape your sound more, and you've got a choice of a low pass filter or a high pass filter. Quite handy here. Expression, you can turn your expression pedal off, expression pedal on. Expression, I think, is MIDI message CC11, so that turns that on or off. Now you've got two types of sustain here, and I just need to go to a synth sound for this, otherwise it won't be as prevalent of what I want to show. So if I play a note, I'll play another note and another note, and we've got a chord now, and all the notes are sounding. If I do sustain 2, what it does, the note, it only sustains the last note you play. So that can come handy when you're playing rock or pop music. We now have the solo and glide, which I think we all know what these do. Glide gives you a nice portamento effect, and you can change it per layer as well. So you could have layer A as on a portamento type effect, but not layers B, C and D. And you can make it legato. It does help if I turn it up, doesn't it? There we go. And you can't modulate that, unfortunately. It'd be good if you could. It'd be quite interesting if you could do that. Solo just makes it all mono. So I'm going to play 2 notes. I can't, I want to play 1 note. I'm just going to go back to my little guitar sound. We've got velocity curves. So it doesn't sound like much is happening there, but there's a subtle way of change of what happens when you hit velocity, and it's sort of how loud the sound, how quickly the sound gets loud, basically. This is probably the best sound to do it on. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, I'll go into layer B. Yeah, that'll do. So if I go into layer B, I'm going to go into layers. And, don't want to go into that one yet. Not that one yet. It's that one I want to. Soft. Hard. And this amp envelope, filter envelope, now that is attached to the amp envelopes and filter envelopes on that particular layer, and how much this velocity curve will affect the amp envelope. So if I turn that right down, it has less effect. If I turn it right the way up, it really impacts on the sound. And I'm sorry if I've just gone and I just realised I'm redlining on the sound here. My apologies. There we go. So that's a great way of doing your velocity curves. And just go back to layer A. There we go. Layer A. Now I keep going into that screen because I want to show you that screen in a minute. If I just bring that down, make that soft again. On this drop down, you can, if you've got one of these keyboards, you can actually use a velocity curve from that keyboard, which is really cool. So, and even if you haven't, you could use the velocity curve of that keyboard. So if I put a Kaiwa on, that's the velocity curve of one of those. Casio. If I just got to use the default, there we go. Now, this is the page I want to show you. Really want to show you in this video. On layers, you can, so you've got your notes and you've got your layers. You can actually turn your layers on and off from here rather than going up to here, if you so wish. You can also change your sound source without having to go into layer A, sound source. You can actually go into layers here, click on sound source, and there we go, you can change your sound source. On top of that, you can also change the volume of that sound source. And now, the best page that is often overlooked is this one. I very much doubt a lot of you have actually delved into this page. There's a lot of lovely stuff on there, especially if you're using Trillion sounds or those from a Keyscape. So most of this also works with normal Omnisphere sounds. The only things that don't work with the normal sounds is the Legato here. That doesn't work. It only works with the Trillion library Legato. First of all, we've got this level thing. Now, some of these sound sources were recorded with multiple sort of microphones and amps and stuff. So you've got the Ampeg amp output, you've got the direct pickup output, and you can mix and match these. So I want just the Ampeg amp. If I want the direct pickup, and I can mix the two. Which is really cool. And then you can change the phase, so you can phase invert the sound. But not many people knew actually that you could do this, and that some of these sound sources had multiple mic inputs going through it, which allows you to sort of create nice sort of balanced sounds that you don't normally hear from Omnisphere. We then have this wonderful release noise. Now it's basically the release noise here is set for hardcore rock release, and it tracks up and down the keyboard. If I turn that off, it will just it won't track. It'll just do on a note basis. Whereas this tracks up and down the keyboard, and I love this because just listen to the release phase of the guitar sound. Okay. Now if I change that to a Blue Nile release, it's slightly different. Might not have heard, you sort of noticed that, but you will do when I change it to Bose hand release. Listen to this now. Get a crunch, which is completely different and alters the sound. And we then have the default mode set in here. But if I change this, this will sort of change the effect of how that release sounds. So it's the release level of an electric piano. So it's sort of like noise that it creates. So if I do bell tone, it's softer and more elongated piano, quite sudden trilogy. And there we go. That's a really wonderful way of changing your sound subtly, but in a very interesting way. And unfortunately, you cannot modulate any of these, which would be interesting to try and do, so you don't get a release level on every single note, but it's a global thing. Legato, this only it doesn't work on all sound sources on the Omnisphere. It only works with trillion sound sources, this, and you can change the sound of the legato, so the octave major 7th, I've got it on at the moment, but for changes tritonics, just changes it ever so slightly and subtly. Now, if your sound source was recorded using the pedal, you can actually route that pedal to the effects section for that layer. Now, if for whatever reason you don't want the pedal parts of the sound to go through effects, turn it off. And then you can turn it on, and you can also affect the level of what the pedal does. Now, this one doesn't actually use the pedal, but if you had a sound source that did, and there's plenty in Trillion that does that, you can alter that as well. And the damper is your stain, and you can change it where how far up the keyboard it will work, so only in a certain zone will you actually have to be able to sustain a sound. And that is it on this particular sound source for you, Zoom. Very interesting, especially this different channels you can play with. If I go to thin, you can thin the samples down. I've got it all on no limit because I've got a beast of a computer, but if you're sort of scratching around for resources because your computer's old or your CPU is spiking, you can change this to your round robins, how many round robins you have. You can ignore the round robin releases, so it'll be the same release sound. So basically, round robin, what they've done is recorded different release sounds, so that when you actually play it, no two release sounds will sound the same in order. You've got velocities as well that you can change, the legato, and your pitch as well. You can do all sorts of weird and wonderful things with it. There is one that says begin training. Now, begin training doesn't mean you're going to go for a run or anything. So you can actually sort of load only the samples that you're going to use during the performance. So if you're going to work on a simple phrase, I could say begin training, play that in, and press the finish, and then you just press finish. There you go, and then you got a final info screen. And that basically is it. So if you enjoyed this video, this walkthrough and in-depth tour of the initial screen that you get when you load up Omnisphere, give it a thumbs up, ding that bell, subscribe to the channel, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye for now.